Hi, welcome to the Moyna Bass Fishers Film Studio. We are going to be talking about the speed of a reel. So the speed of the reel is basically measured or can be looked at in terms of gear ratio and then line pickup per one revolution of the reel's handle. So my recommendation, and they come in different ratios and different line pickups. I mean, you got super high speed reels of 9-to-1 ratios, and then you got some that are like down in that 6.0 or even less in a few cases. So when do you want the high speed? When do you want the low speed? Well, I'm here to tell you that in just about every case you want the high speed. And we're using the high speed not to rapidly fish our lures with the intent of a rapidly retrieved lure is going to draw more strikes. That's not why we're doing this. We're using the high speed to, yes, rapidly retrieve the bait, but only because we know we're in a very low percentage zone of the water. And so we want to just quickly, as fast as we can, get that bait through that dead zone so we can then get it in, recast it, and put it back in higher productive water. For example, let's say I'm going down a bank with a spinnerbait where there's flooded bushes, and let's say the flooded bushes they're the first line of flooded bushes in the lake. They're maybe 2 to 3 feet deep. So there's no bushes between the bank. There's that one line of bushes close to the bank, and then there's nothing between there and the boat. So you're going to get the bites. If you're on the pattern where they're on them bushes up there, you're going to get that bite up by the bush, not 10 feet away from the bush between you and the boat. So you make that cast, you reel your spinner baits past the bush, maybe kill it, whatever you think might trigger them. And then once you get a certain distance from that bush, recast. So that high speed is for that in between time to recast. And not just with like a cast and retrieve like that, but I really love these high speed reels for pitching and flipping type applications. You flip the bait out there, let it fall down to the bottom. Let's say you flipped it out there in a little clump of lily pads, jig it a few times, pull it through lily pads, drop it outside the edge of the lily pads, no bite, cast or flip to the next little clump or edge and do the same thing. You're getting that bait through that dead water where there's a very small chance a bite will come. So reel in quick. And if you do this, now this may not be so critical for a casual fisherman, but for a tournament angler fishing, our tournament days are typically about 8 hours. So for a tournament angler, that time you're saving with a high speed reel on each cast, each flip, each pitch, that accumulates. And by the end of the day, you have made more presentations to the fish in productive water as compared to somebody who's using a lower speed retrieve ratio. Very important. And of course, on the pro level, we're fishing entire seasons, multi-day tournaments. So let's say, for example, in the Major League Fishing Pro Circuit, we got 6 tournaments, minimum up to 4 days in each tournament, but a minimum of 2 days. So that's 12 days of fishing minimum. That's a lot of accumulated presentations that you are benefiting by using a high-speed ratio reel. So the time where you might want a low-speed ratio reel is there's two situations I can think of. And that would be, one is if you have problems with retrieve discipline. If you find yourself getting into a habit, let's say you got a high-speed reel, but the fish want the bait really slow. Let's say you're throwing a crankbait and they want that crankbait fish slowly, or a chatterbait, they want that chatterbait fish slowly. You throw it out there, and if you find yourself where you're just getting automatic robot mode, well, you could end up over cranking that thing and fishing it too fast with a high speed reel. So there are guys that purposely put if they want to fish the bait really slow, they'll purposely put it on a 6.0 retrieve ratio or lower. And just because that gives them that, that just gives them that better discipline at maintaining that really slow retrieve. Okay. The other thing that you can run into is there'll be guys that like that lower retrieve ratio if they're throwing baits that pull really hard. So we're talking about the bigger swim baits that pull hard. They just feel like they have more torque with the lower ratio reel. Or let's say you're throwing a giant crankbait like a 10XD. You throw that out there, and they just like having that lower ratio retrieve, just for pulling those harder pulling baits. And one other thing on the efficiency, I talked about how you have that dead water. Well, if let's say you're throwing a rattle trap over the grass and you make a long cast, you crank the bait 3 feet, and suddenly you've got weeds on your bait. You can't snap them off. Well, now the whole cast is dead because you got weeds on your bait. So with that high-speed reel, you can get that bait in, and you literally can save like 30% of the time by using a high-speed ratio to get that in. Now that's with bait casts. What about spinning? Okay, here's our spinning reel. This one's still on the rod. There's our spinning reel. Spinning reels are often measured as far as speed in terms of how much line is retrieved per 1 revolution of the handle. I mean, there's some some companies will do that with their bait casters as well, and it can matter because you can have this is a big spinning reel. This would be a size 40 in this particular brand, and this big diameter spool, every time this bail goes around the spool, it really eats up a lot of line quick, as compared to if this was a little tiny spool like a 2500 or 25 type size spool. This is going to take up way more line quicker, and I love that. I love that in spinning reels, for many of the reasons I just explained earlier. The other thing is they often do publish gear ratios with spinning reels, but that can be somewhat misleading because you can have a small spinning reel with a higher gear ratio, but like I mentioned earlier, the size of the spool is so small that the line pickup isn't nearly as to the same level that a bigger spool reel is with that same gear ratio. So with spinning, you got to pay attention to the size of the spool and the gear ratio, and if they do happen to publish the amount of line pickup per 1 revolution, that's really helpful. So let's see what else. Yeah, that is about it. And really, when it does come to spinning, again, I'm using the high-speed reel or a larger spool just about every time. They are a little heavier, noticeably heavier. The distance here between the finger and the rod's a little greater. They're a little more cumbersome, a little more heavier. So the only time where I really drop down in the size of my reels is I might drop down to this is a size 40, so I might drop down to like a size 30. Let's say if I'm like skipping the worm under a dock or something like that. So anyways, that is the advice I have on reel speeds. So I don't know what you gotta feel about that, but it's all about maximizing our time in productive water, minimizing our time in dead water. It's more important for the pro fisherman. If you're a casual fisherman, it's probably not gonna. It's not that big a deal. So it's a measurable thing. So even a casual fisherman, it's going to matter, but is it that important to the casual fisherman at that point in time? That's up to each person. So anyways, that's about all I got to say about that. Over.